as resolve.
Shiv Arur's been working the phone line, speaking to people in the eastern Ladakh sector. Shiv, what have you been able to gather about what led to this violent skirmish? What happened late at night where a commanding officer, and try and put this in context for those who don't understand the military, you ordinarily won't have a situation where the commanding officer is part of some initial patrol party. So this was obviously going on for a long while where the CO himself got involved somehow and found himself in the midst of this violence. Shiv.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Rahul. There was a situation that actually had escalated over the last 72 hours is what our understanding is. There had been some altercations, some verbal volleys between both sides, and then things kind of spiraled apparently late last evening when troops came very close to each other. The commanding officer, the colonel rank officer from this infantry battalion was also there. There was a bit of a scuffle. He also got involved in that scuffle, and then things, all hell broke loose, after which stones started being pelted by troops who had arrived there from another, encampment which was close by. And like you showed us in that map, this is the mouth of the Galwan Valley at near petrol point 14, where this particular clash has taken place. We understand the army officially saying that no bullets have been fired. And that it was only stone pelting and the use of metal clubs, which is barbaric by itself. But we are given to understand that the injuries are very extensive on both sides. The Indian Army has also officially, categorically said that there have been casualties on the Chinese side, but there is no information or confirmation on the nature or the number of the casualties on the Chinese side at this point of time. This, this spilling of blood, this horrible spilling of blood in the Galwan Valley happens to be the first time that there have been casualties in anger between the Indian and Chinese side in 45 years. The last time blood was spilled between both sides in anger was in 1975 in Arunachal Pradesh, when an Indian Army patrol was ambushed by the Chinese in that particular area. And now we're talking about the Galwan Valley, which was one of the 4 standoff points. I can confirm to all of our viewers that patrol point 14 is where senior military officials, I'm told brigadier level officers, are meeting on both sides to diffuse the situation. But one has to wonder what kind of diffusing is going to be possible when troops on both sides have just drawn blood, when fatalities and casualties have been inflicted on, we can confirm, the Indian side, and we can only conjecture on what the Chinese side casualties and the nature of them actually are. The Indian Army, for the moment, has said that no press briefing is likely, but I'd like to tell you that my sources are telling me that the Director General of Military Operations could possibly brief the press. This is under discussion at the Ministry of Defense level at this point of time. So if that happens, there will be an opportunity to put some questions to the Army and the Ministry of Defense and get more clarity on the specifics. Remember, the Ministry of Defense, Rajnath Singh, the Defense Minister, has said in multiple interviews that the situation is being handled at the diplomatic and the military level. This was a localized clash, but it's impossible to simply isolate it as a localized clash, because when you've got high-level military interactions taking place on both sides, how do you account for or explain a violent situation of this kind where deaths have actually been inflicted on both sides? That's the big question. Remember, the two sides have this standoff. There was a violent brawl that took place on the 5th and the 6th of May on the north banks of the Galwan Valley, of the Pangong Lake, Pangong Lake, I beg your pardon. And after that, there have been a couple of clashes, not very big clashes, but none of them have resulted in death or even serious injury. And that's the reason why I want to push home this context for our viewers, that even though both sides have been talking at the colonel level, brigadier level, major general level, and then the lieutenant general, corps commander level, which took place last week, even then it appears that the message of jointly trying to defuse the situation has not filtered down fully and has certainly not been implemented in this particular situation, where obviously there has been a horrifying trigger point after which these deaths have taken place in a medieval-style border brawl between troops on both sides. The Indian Army categorically saying that no bullets have been fired. The last time bullets were fired between both sides was in 1967 during the Nathula and Nakhula battle between Indian and Chinese forces in Sikkim, and no bullets have been fired since. And given the deaths that we're seeing here of a colonel from the from the infantry regiment, the commanding officer of that infantry regiment, and 2 soldiers, there have been some rumors that are going around on social media on the extent of the damage on the Indian side. I can confirm that at least a dozen Indian soldiers have received pretty serious injuries as well. Let's listen in to some reactions that we've been getting in since we broke the story first here on India Today.
China has to apologize straight away for initiating this on-the-spot conflict, and this cannot be taken by India lying down. And if in case it's a firing, well, we may have to go on for a certain amount of kinetic response in that area, but best would be localize the situation. But if in case it has been on account of physical assault or hitting by stone or something, I think that too is not going to be accepted. And these Chinese, for that matter, I mean, the Chinese government has to make an official statement. What punishment has been meted out to these people?
China's aggression, which began with occupation of some vantage locations in Indian Ladakh, has now taken the form of a armed aggression and the killing of an Indian Army commandant and 2 troops today, or was it last night? So what we are seeing is a major escalation by China, an escalation that will ensure that these developments along the Himalayas, the standoff and the tensions will continue for a while. Indian Army men were martyred. Whether they were martyred by bullets or by nail-studded rods and rocks is immaterial. The fact is that this whole pretense that India and China have not engaged in any kind of armed confrontation, that pretense is over now. This was an armed confrontation in which Indian army men were martyred, and therefore it marks a watershed.
Okay, we've got more breaking news.